I am Michael Jagisar. I'm currently serving as CWM's Mission Secretary for the Europe region. I'm in conversation with Sione Javier about the DARE program of Council for World Mission. DARE stands for Discernment and Radical Engagement. Since 2018, DARE has evolved on three platforms. First, are DARE's resources created for church people in the forms of, for example, Bible studies and handbooks that explain key theological subjects in relation to the focus and themes of Council for World Mission. For example, doing theology and reading Bible in the context of empires.
Second, DARE forums, which bring together theologians, biblical scholars, church people, activists, ministers, and so on, to present papers and share their wisdom on various topics, again, in relation to the themes and focus of CWM, but with openness to developments in the fields of theological and religious studies. The presenters at these forums include men and women, older and younger folk, church and non-church folk, professors and students from different parts of the world.
Third are DARE publications. Several of the papers from the DARE forums are revised and published with the intention that they become resources for theological education. They are published by established world publishers so that they are available in major theological libraries in order that DARE publications become part of the literature for the present and future generations of theologians and theological educators.
To an extent, DARE is a form of mission. Whereas missionaries in the past came from the north and told us multicolored folk from the south how to think about ourselves, think about the world, how to think about God, and they take our lands, our wealth, our minds, and faith in return, DARE brings the minds and commitments of people from both South and North together in order to imagine how the future of theology, the future of church and religious studies might be shaped.
To an extent also, DARE reflects an old form of resistance. To borrow from Marcus Garvey and Bob Marley, DARE is an attempt to free our minds from mental slavery. To that we add that DARE is also about freeing our faiths from theological enslavement.
This is, of course, not saying that DARE is not free of problems, but that is a topic for conversation.
For this conversation, however, we want to explain the plan in response to COVID-19. We are going to hold the DARE Forum in Ghana from October the 30th to November the 2nd, but that has been postponed to 2021 because of the pandemic. We will have an eDARE Forum from October the 30th to November the 1st. So please note those dates. DARE 2020 will be in the form of webinars. And so we use eDARE as the label for this year's forum. Further information about the speakers and programs will be available on this webpage at a later date. So stay tuned as we turn up the volume and the tempo. We also want to explain the theme for eDARE, doing theology in the new normal. The COVID-19 pandemic is the new context in which we now do theology, do church, do mission, and do ministry.
COVID-19 is the context in which we live. eDARE 2020 focuses on the COVID-19 pandemic, but mindful that there are ongoing crises like climate injustice, sexism, racism, and the Black Lives Matter movements, and so on. Those are in the context where we do theology, do church, and where we live. Focusing on COVID-19, the responses to the pandemic have been driven by fear, with social distancing and locking down of communities and borders as the most effective tactics. Out of fear and strategies that separate and isolate, emerged the new normal, which seems to mutate daily. EDARE 2020 will revisit 4 old responses to crises, and those are assure, protest, trick, and amend. We will revisit those to explore if and or how those might still be relevant and or how they might be mutated for the current pandemic.
In crises, some people assure one another. For example, they may say, everything will be okay. We will take care of you. God will look after us, and so on.
In crises, some people protest against the governments or the system. They protest against self-centered leaders or shitstems that have allowed the crisis to come and to get worse.
In crises, some people trick those who have benefited or who benefit and profit from the crisis. Like, for instance, when Robin Hood raided the rich and privileged to share with the poor, or when enslaved Black people tricked white slave owners, or when, for instance, many Rwandan people tricked the Hutus in order to protect some of the Tutsis, and many other examples.
In crises, some people change and they amend their ways. They stop doing the things that prolong the crisis. They change their ways, their hearts, their minds, and they expect the crisis to settle down.
So in our next conversation, we'll introduce the speakers and the program. So stay tuned, keep well, and energize.